What's going on, Elevator fam? We've got another episode here on the podcast today. We have an amazing guest. Her name is Rachel Freiman. She's the CEO of MindStrong Fitness. She's a lover of donuts and the author of a best-selling book, Becoming MindStrong, the truth about health, fitness, and the bullshit that's holding you back. Guys, I just did the audiobook of this, and it is a really, really good book. As part of the bio, talks about eat donuts and lose weight, so I was kind of skeptical about it, but man, it dives deep into the neuroscience of habit changing and really diving deep into mindset, which is my number one thing. I talk about it a ton on the podcast of changing my mindset, having a paradigm shift. So I highly recommend go checking out the book, guys. Again, it's called Becoming MindStrong. You can go on Amazon, get the actual PDF version, get a hardback, or do the audio like I did. She has more than 15 years of classroom instruction and certifications in personal training, sports nutrition, and behavior modification. Rachel developed MindStrong Fitness with an inside-out approach to focus on both physical and mental attributes and building healthy, sustainable habits. Guys, we get into a lot of good stuff here about getting healthy. There's a ton of nuggets. Give it a listen. Remember to share, like, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thank you. Rachel Freiman, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I have to say, when I first saw one clip of the bio, it says eat donuts and still lose weight. I thought, oh, not one of these kind of diets. I'm like, I was a little resistant. I'm glad that I kept digging in, because when I got into your book, you wrote a book called Becoming MindStrong. You really dive deep into what you mean by that and how diets just don't work. Restrictive diets don't work. So the book's awesome. I highly recommend everybody go check that out. But let's start kind of at the beginning, and we're going to dive deep into a lot of interest. Everything you talked about in the book is so much of what I'm interested in, and neuroscience and habit changing and like all that stuff is really, really interesting to us. So let's take it back. How did you get into the all fitness in general?
Yeah, my backstory is not what most people would expect. I actually started out as a freelance jazz musician. Music was my life for most of it. I went to a performing arts high school, did my master's in music, and eventually, after years and years of freelancing in New York, just that life is a ton of fun and not as fun as you get older and more responsible.
Oh yeah.
So I wound up moving to Florida and teaching middle school music. And I loved teaching. I just loved everything about it. And it's also a pretty draining job. It's a lot of taking deep breaths and being patient and putting your needs second. So I started going to the gym just as an outlet at the end of really long work days where I was overworked and underpaid like every teacher. And what started to happen was a very organic progression where other female teachers would come up to me and say things like, I wish I could go to the gym, but I have no idea what I'm doing, or I'm intimidated, or I just don't feel good enough about my body to even put on gym clothes. So just very naturally, I was like, hey, I'm going after work anyway. Why don't you come along with me? And I always retell the story. It was almost a bit selfish because the feedback that I heard lit me up. I heard these women talking about, I'm showing up as a different teacher, as a different partner, as a different mother. I've stopped avoiding mirrors, which is something sadly a lot of women do because they don't like how they look. And it just sparked something in me where this is what I want to do. I want to help every woman relight this spark and walk around with that confidence that we tend to lose as we age. So I started my company, MindStrong Fitness, as this little side hustle while I was still a full-time teacher working 12-hour days. And because we have such a focus on non-restriction, on doing this as a sustainable lifestyle of training our inner monologue and our mindset and our habits, along with the logistics, it really took off and skyrocketed to where I wound up leaving teaching for good and jumping into this full time. And it's just been onward and upward from there.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The fulfillment you get by helping others and seeing other people's lives change. I mean, that's what kept me kind of going in this business and talking about these type of topics, because when people come up to you and just like are so thrilled that their life is changing because of what you can just share that you've learned. I mean, it's so fulfilling. It's awesome.
Absolutely. It is a win-win in every sense of the word.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to kind of just go through kind of different topics that you went over in your book. And you kind of start with the importance of mindset, in which, I'm creating a coaching program right now. And I keep coming back to like, okay, working out's awesome. Nutrition is the best, but what really came down to me is a paradigm shift for me and changing my mindset on different, like everything I realized I learned is from growing up, and I learned from my parents and people surrounding me. And it's not really what I per se wanted or liked. So it sent me down this rabbit hole of kind of a paradigm shift. They're trying to figure out what's the right thing, what makes me feel good, what's the correct thing to do. Talk to me a little bit about, you talk about it heavily in your book, is changing people's mindset.
Yeah, the first 75% of the book is all about mindset. And mindset is one of those topics, it tends to get a really bad reputation as like woo-woo, feel good. We call it rainbows and glitter fluff, right?
Yeah.
But at its core, I'm a huge neuroscience nerd. And at its core, all of this comes down to neuroscience. And when we can understand that, we can also understand how in control of our life we really are. Because as you're saying, you're labeling it perfectly as a paradigm shift. We tend to think as humans that we just have these labels. I was born a math person. I was born not a math person. I was born to be larger, right? I'm the stocky one of the family. I'm a person who works out. I'm not a person who works out. And when we really start to do this work, what we understand is that a belief is simply a thought that we've played on repeat until we've literally cemented into our brain to feel like truth. And I mean, we could nerd out on neuroscience all day, but the quick version is anytime you think a thought or take an action, a neural connection's formed in your brain. And every time you repeat that action or repeat that thought, there's this stuff called myelin that works like cement. And it's coding that neural connection until it becomes a full formed habit. So when we understand that's true, both in thought and in action, we can understand a couple things. Number one, this is why we don't need major life overhauls when it comes to health and fitness, because all we need is consistency to build a habit. And it also explains, for the purpose of this conversation, what a belief actually is, right? If you've spent the last 30 years saying, well, I'm just the big one in the family because that was the running joke as a kid. Well, of course, that feels like truth because it's literally cemented in your brain that way. So our work and what we do within our own coaching programs is to red flag those thoughts, because when something's cemented in as a habit, we don't even know what's happening. It's autopilot. It's become part of our subconscious mind that's running 95% of our life. So we have to first red flag those thoughts and be like, wait a second, is this capital T truth, or is this just a thought that I've played on repeat for decades? And then we can start to do the work to consciously, it's literally rewiring your brain for the thoughts, the belief systems that serve this new journey that you're on and this new person that you're building to become.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. You quoted Dr. Joe Dispenza in one area of the book, and how he references a ton. When you said his name, I'm like, yes, she gets it. Like,
yes, that is my man.
I love how and you describe it very well. Like you have over 50,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are in the past of the same thoughts you thought yesterday. And there's been several science studies, relating, what you think about stressful environments will make you sick. Well, vice versa. Can you not change that and have positive thoughts to make you the opposite way? So it's super fascinating. I'm a big neuroscience nerd like yourself, because it really comes down to that. It plays such a huge role in everything, on how you look at the outlook on fitness and nutrition and how you look at yourself. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's so true. And as I said, people, especially in the world of social media, people think the power of positive thinking. And we think about Becky on Instagram posting motivational memes, but it really does come down to this neuroscience cycle. In my book, as you read, we talk a lot about the thoughts, feelings, action, results cycle, because this is the cycle that controls our life. I referenced a minute ago that science has shown that 95% of our life is run by our subconscious mind. And subconscious, by definition, means that we're not consciously aware of what's going on. So we're waking up every day saying, here we go, new year, new me. I'm going to, do this, going to have a major life overhaul, eat clean, go to the gym. But if we're not paying attention to the thoughts on which we ruminate, the feelings, because a feeling is just a chemical reaction that's happening because of those thoughts, the actions that we're taking because of how we're feeling and the results those bring, this is the loop that controls our life. Until you get conscious of that, until you take control of that, we could wake up every New Year's and say, new year, new me, but nothing's actually going to change until we do this deeper habits of conscious work.
Yeah, it's huge. I always say, think about what you're thinking about, because a lot of people, I say that to people and they're kind of like, what? And I'm like, and I learned that from years ago. It plays such a huge role when you wake up and you feel maybe a little depressed, or you feel a little sad, or feel a little happy. When you think about what your mind's thinking about during those times, then you can really start connecting the dots. Did I look at social media when I first woke up? Did I have a bad text from somebody I didn't want to see, or a bad email? Then you start connecting these dots, and it's like, holy shit, like I get it now. Like it's great. And it goes into, you talk about it in the book as well, as like paralysis by analysis, and really just getting started, because it's so funny. There's so many people that I run by. They're like, no, I ordered all my supplements. I'm waiting for them to get in the mail. I got my running shoes coming. I'm waiting on my socks. I'm like, dude, just go for a walk.
Just start. Just start.
Just start. And you say that so much, just do the work, just get started. And it's until people kind of realize that it becomes pretty difficult for them.
Yeah, that's, I think I tell the story in there that when I started, people tend to have this preconceived notion of like, well, you work in the fitness world, you must have been born buff, or maybe, you grew up in a family that knew this stuff. I was a hot mess when I started. Like my only saving grace is that reels were not a thing back then. Otherwise there would be viral reels of me just making an idiot of myself in the gym. But the only difference was I kind of embraced that. I was like, I don't care that I suck at this. I'm just going to stay curious and learn, because human nature says we're not going to stay in the same place, right? If I suck at what I'm doing, I'm not just going to embrace that and keep sucking. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to get a coach. I'm going to get help, and I'm going to naturally get better. But so many people, especially in the world of health and fitness, we're designed to be so all in, all out. Either I'm doing it perfectly or I'm not starting. And when we can learn, and for us recovering perfectionists, this is hard, when we can learn to live in that gray of like embracing the suck. I'm going to suck for a while, and then it's going to get better. So let's have fun. Let's stay curious while we're going through that learning curve and get out of that, as you called it, paralysis by analysis. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. It's such a huge thing. Tell me a little bit about, because you mentioned it a lot, is how restricted dieting is just not sustainable. When people try to tell you like, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, you can only have this on Sunday, and you can only have that. What's your thoughts on that whole mindset of like, you can only do this, and you can only have the frozen foods for, this 6 month period? What's your advice on that?
Yeah. So, this as a coach, there are so many people in the health and fitness world, when we have these women come to us and they are like kick-ass successful entrepreneurs, business women, whatever it is. And they're like, man, why can I kick ass in every area of my life except this, right? Why can I run a 7-figure business like a boss and have the willpower to put my head down and get work done? But when it comes to nutrition, I just cannot do it. Why can't I crack this code? And one of the first things that we always need to do is we call it wiping the slate clean. We need to show people that as much as I'm a fan of radical personal responsibility, this is not your fault. Because and we actually do this with our clients, we do a training where we show them, like called pulling back the Wizard of Oz curtain, right? There's the big bad Oz and they pull back the curtain, it's nothing. We show them how every single point system, shake system, frozen meal system works. And at their core, if you actually sit down and think about this or do the exercise in my book, what you see is that every single diet out there is essentially doing the same thing. It's telling you what foods you quote unquote can or can't eat. Now, if you study human psychology, there's something called reactance. And reactance, very simply put, means we don't like being told what we can or can't do, right? I taught middle school. Middle schoolers used to always get a bad rep for this, but we're like this as adults. If I say to you, think about anything in the world that you want, except a giant blue elephant, where does our brain immediately go, right? That's reactance at work. Don't tell me what I can or can't do. So we go on these diets, whether it's shake systems, point system, frozen meals, cutting out carbs, caveman, like you name it, they're all the same. Then we put our horse blinders on and we say, I can't. And eventually we cave, which of course we do. It's our human nature to cave. But then when we cave, we've been restricting so long that we binge and we go down the rabbit hole of who am I kidding, thinking this was ever going to work. All the limiting beliefs rush in. We start again next month, repeat the cycle indefinitely. So what we teach is half biology, right? It is not Rachel's Laws of Health and Fitness. It is a skill of approaching nutrition where if you love donuts like I do, fit a donut, right? If you're someone who likes a glass of wine or a glass of whiskey at the end of the day, fit it in your plan. And it flows with human psychology because we don't need to binge, right? On Saturday, if I want to have 2 slices of pizza, I don't need to eat the whole pie because I could have 2 slices on Tuesday if I wanted to. And when we get out of that good, bad, allowed, not allowed, we also start to blur those lines of all in, all out. We get out of perfectionism, and it becomes a state of living where it's no longer a diet. It's just a sustainable approach to nutrition.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way for the masses to really catch on to this, is because you give them their calories where they can stay in, and as long as you're staying within those boundaries, then yeah, you can have your pizza, you can have your donut. And I think what people will run across is similar to me. It's like, you go a month with maybe not having any cheap foods, but then you get to a point where it's like you don't crave it as much, or you don't want to binge eat. You don't want to eat the whole, large pepperoni pizza or the whole Dunkin' Donuts box of donuts. It's just one or two, and you realize like, I kind of feel like shit. I don't really want any more.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense because, again, as humans, we want the power of choice. And usually saying I can't have a donut makes us want a donut 20 times more. Yeah. Sometimes simply saying, listen, if you want a donut, eat a freaking donut, fit it in. Then it's like, yeah, but if I do it, I know I'm going to feel like crap and I'm not going to stay full very long. So maybe I don't want the donut anymore. It's like this psychological trick we get to play with ourselves by just giving ourselves permission is sometimes all we need to make those more nutritious choices.
Yeah, for sure. And I like how you talk about in the book, because just from talking with clients and other friends and people in the industry, we tend to be really hard on ourselves when we're not doing the right thing, when we mess up on the diet. And you kind of put it in a good way that I really haven't thought about it, but I've done it without knowing it, is talk to yourself almost like you're talking to a 4-year-old, right? Like, don't beat yourself up. Don't call yourself an asshole. Like, just sit down like you would. Maybe you could tell that story of how you would just relate that to talking to a little kid. Like, it's going to be all right.
Absolutely. Yeah. We call it talking to yourself like a kindergartner, because at the root of this, what we need to understand, whether we're talking about nutrition, workouts, whatever, at the root of this is human psychology, right? And human psychology states, Freud discovered something called the pleasure principle, which simply states that as humans, we are designed to avoid pain and seek pleasure, but first and foremost, to avoid pain. Now, what most of us have decided somewhere in life is that the reason we are go-getters, the reason that we're successful in whatever field we're in, is because we are raging jerks to ourselves. Right? Well, Rachel, if I'm nice to myself, I won't be a good go-getter anymore. And I like to play a little game where I tell people, think of your favorite teacher growing up. Like, don't filter who's that favorite teacher. And the feedback that we've heard time and time again is they may have been the most strict teacher. They may have set the bar higher than any other teacher, but I've never once done this and heard someone say they were a complete asshole to me, right? There's a difference between being strict, and there's a difference between setting the high bar and helping you believe you can get there. But somewhere along the line, we decided, we turned 18, whatever it is, became an adult. And now the key is to just berate ourselves into doing what we have to do. But when we understand that we are pleasure-seeking creatures designed to avoid pain, we're not going to stay in a state of discomfort. We're not going to stay in a state that feels like crap. So when we go on these diets and we cave and we binge and we start beating ourselves up, of course we quit, because everything about that is pain. The restriction, the binging, how we feel afterwards, how we beat ourselves up. So some of the most important work we do is in this mindset training. It's about, we all have this inner monologue that talks to us all day long, whether you're conscious of it yet or not. And when you start to pay attention to it, it's shocking of what a jerk the voice in your head is most of the day. It's constantly telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing, what we have to do. Why didn't you do this? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you like so-and-so? So we always start by red flagging. I call it shining the light of awareness, right? If you're a quarterback, you don't just wake up one day and change the game. You watch hours of footage to see what's going on, what's working, what's not, and then you make those tweaks. And it's the same thing here. We just start by red flagging. Interesting. No should, no shouldn't. Just, I did not even notice that all day long I am beating myself up. From there, we can take that next step. And this is where we call it talking to ourselves like a kindergartner. So we like to imagine, you're sitting on a park bench and this little girl runs up to you just sobbing, like snot crying, can't catch her breath, can barely get the words out. And finally, she's able to tell you that she doesn't know how to tie her shoes. And the question we pose is, what do you do? Do you beat her up verbally, right? Do you tell her that she's a loser and she's never going to learn to tie her shoes? Or do you kneel down, maybe rub her back, tell her to take a deep breath, show her how to do it, and then show her how to do it 20 more times and practice gently along with her? And at the end of this, the question becomes, why are we any different? right? At what age, at what stage of life did we decide that that's not how we learn anymore? And the answer is that's just some arbitrary rule we made up, right? If when we can learn to become our best coach instead of that jerk to ourselves, that's how we're going to stay with this. When we, it's not about sugarcoating, it's not about rainbows and glitter. Like you decide that you're going to stick with macro tracking, the skill that we teach with nutrition, and you just completely bomb, right? One day you just go 1,000 calories over, nowhere close. Well, in the past, we'd go down the rabbit hole. You suck at this. Who are you kidding thinking this time would be any different? Like, it's stupid of you to believe that you'd actually stick with something. Then we get to red flag and we pause and we breathe and we say, you know what? Yeah, that sucked. Like, that did not feel good. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I thought I was going to hit my goals. I was nowhere near. And let's dig in a little bit. Maybe I am restricting, even though I know I don't need to. Maybe I'm like holding back the fact that I felt the need to binge. Maybe I just need a little more work with this. Maybe I need to talk with my coach about pre-planning or practicing or getting better at this. What can I do so that tomorrow is a little bit better in the skill than today? Right? We didn't sugarcoat that it felt like crap. And we didn't beat ourselves up and go down the rabbit hole because that's not serving anyone. And this is one of my favorite. I mean, this exercise will change your life. The caveat I always like to put with this is it will absolutely feel like the hokiest, most ridiculous thing you've ever done. Yeah. Because we're not used to being nice to ourselves. And that's the whole point of it.
Sure. Yeah. And it's the trick to have longevity with it too, because I think that's the number one thing people fall off. And, I know you see it is, a few bad days, one bad day. And then it's just like you said, like it's the same thing as the last one, same thing as last year, and then it's just off to the races again. It's like, well, maybe we'll try it again next year. But, I think that's a great outlook on trying to just try to give yourself a chance. Because like you said, a lot of people don't look at the small wins that they have each day, right? Like, okay, maybe you went 1,000 over, but you got a good night's sleep. You woke up early for work, you stretched, like just count that stuff. Like, don't beat yourself up as much. And I think that's a lot of people don't realize that. They just jump straight to the negative part, which is really hard on us.
Yeah, absolutely. And even that, this is not just everything. I'm a very logical person. So it's never just about like, let's make ourselves feel good, right? When we dig into the behind the scenes, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for celebrating those small wins. Because I always like to joke that humans were just glorified drug addicts because every decision we make in life, we are searching for a dopamine fix. It's the reason we have careers. It's the reason we fall in love. It's the reason we work out. It's the reason we want to be rich. We're looking for a dopamine release. So when you sit there and you beat yourself up and you tell yourself, who was I kidding thinking you're going to stick with this? That feels like shit, right? Reactance, pleasure principle states we're not going to stick with it. And when we take that moment to celebrate, you know what? Yeah, you did not hit your macros today. Like, didn't feel good. We're not going to sugarcoat. But you did today that was really awesome. You said you were going to get your workout in, and you absolutely did. Like, that right there is kick-ass. That is success. That is momentum. And in that 10 seconds we took to throw ourselves an internal party, our brain released some dopamine into our body. And our body says, ooh, there's that fix I've been looking for. I want more of that. So the next time you don't feel like working out, which you won't, right? Motivation comes and goes. But now your brain has proof of, wait a second, remember last time I did it and I took that 10-second internal party and I got that little hit I wanted? Let me do that again. And this is how we start to organically get that consistency we need to build habits. But it's never going to happen by beating yourself down. It happens exactly as you said, by celebrating those small wins along the way.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating how you talk about, we're always chasing the dopamine. And I always try to tell people that, like, we're like a chemical factory up here, right? And once you figure out that you can kind of control what's, pumping it and what's not, it's like, that's when, meditation and working out and, cold plunging and all this stuff becomes really fascinating, because it really does. It ignites a dopamine hit, a serotonin hit, like whatever you're looking for. Like, you can start learning these cool different ways to activate the body to start pumping you full of that stuff. And like you said, we're chasing that dopamine hit. So when you can figure out how to pump more of it, you're like, oh, I like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We call it living from the inside out, right? When you approach life, when you approach everything from how do I want to feel? Not, people talk about manifestation and people are like, I'll just focus on $1 million. It'll show up. Like that's not how vibrations work, right? But when we can focus on how do I want to feel today? Because all a feeling is a chemical reaction in your brain that's coming from the thoughts you're ruminating on. So again, going back to that thoughts, feelings, action, results cycle, if we don't like the vibration, the frequency with which we're showing up in the world, there's a feeling going on internally, right? And that feeling is being sparked by those thoughts on which we're ruminating in that moment. So there's a million methods, like you just said. It's very personal of how you reset. Some people work out, some people meditate, some people do both, some people just do some conscious breathing. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're consciously choosing, how do I want to feel? And when you're conscious of how you want to feel, then you become conscious of the energy you put out and what you attract back in your life. And again, we could have a whole conversation about about like attracting like, but it's another one of those topics that, you know, people think is woo-woo, feel good, fluffy stuff, and it's science at its core. This is physics.
Yeah, for sure. I heard a good quote the other day. It was frequency is what you frequently see. So, you know, if you're one to be on a good frequency, on a good vibe, you want to be up top, then, you know, surround yourself with like-minded individuals, and that's you're going to be on that vibe. You know, it's nice.
I like that. I like that saying. I'm going to steal that.
It's cool. I like that. So you tell a story in the book, which it relates to a lot of newbies coming into the fitness space, because you take someone that's never worked out before, that's never dieted before, and they get really sore, they get really nervous going in the gym. And you tell the story of going on a roller coaster with your mom and how you were super pumped at the top of it, ready to go plunging down, and like, this is the best day ever. And your mom is like scared to death, like, I'm going to die. And it's so hit home with me, because like, I'll try to bring my wife into the steam room and the cold plunge, and she's just like, what in the hell? Like, same thing. It's like, it's miserable for her. She has sore muscles the next day. She's not digging it. But maybe you can talk a little bit about that. It's just like the correlating and how repetition of, you know, I tried to play professional golf a few years ago, and I tried to more of the, just because I wanted to try it. And you get the nervous feeling, but then when you start diving into high performers, you realize they just rewire the feeling of nervous. To them, it's not nervous, it's excitement. And you tell that to yourself over and over. So you're relabeling the feeling that you're getting. So it's no longer, I'm going to die. It's now you're relabeling it. You're telling yourself over and over and over again. Maybe you could tell that story, because I liked how you said it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's exactly what the story was. It's a true story. I was on a roller coaster with my mom as a kid. I was sitting in front of her. I think it was like Splash Mountain. Like, it wasn't even a big roller coaster, but it was enough where like her arms were around my waist. And I didn't know my mom was afraid of roller coasters, because I was little. I was probably 10. And we're at the top of the drop, and I'm like, hands up in the air. This is the best thing ever. And my mom is like squeezing my insides out, scared out of her mind. And then kind of the kicker to the story is we get to the end, and she's like, thank God that's over. And I was like, Mom, that was the warm-up drop. Like, that wasn't even the big one. And what we're talking about in that chapter is the power of interpretation. And fear and excitement is a really interesting one to talk about, power of interpretation, because the physical signs are the same, right? If you ask someone to describe what it feels like to be excited, your heart races, you get a little jittery, right? You're sweating a bit. What is it like to be nervous? It's the same symptoms. So I always like using fear and excitement, because it's such a clear indicator that it's all about the interpretation in our mind. And we can take that conversation one step further to talk about anything, right? Most women who don't go to the gym currently, it's because they're intimidated. It's because they have preconceived notion of what they should look like to be in there. That weight training is for men, or we get into a whole conversation about beliefs about it making it bulky. But there's a preconceived notion of what that experience means to them. And when we go back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago about neural connections and myelin and wiring in habits, those reactions to situations are 100% just habit. Right? If you're someone who sees a roller coaster and freaks out, well, you have probably spent decades wiring in that reaction to just the thought of a roller coaster. If you're the opposite, if you're like me and you live and breathe to go on crazy roller coasters, like the thought of it gets you all hyped up. Why? Because I've spent decades going on them and wiring in beliefs that support that. And this becomes so vital in our health and fitness journey, because up until now, we've made associations with our health, right? I'm a bigger person. I'm never going to be thin. I'm not a person who works out. Everyone's staring at me in the gym. Like, pick your poison. And these things feel like truth because you decided them decades ago. And it's science. It's been wired into your brain over and over again. And you've spent decades looking for proof that this is true, until now it just runs on autopilot. And this goes back to our earlier conversation where we need to identify it first, right? All we know right now is that when we think about the gym, we feel tense, we feel tight, we feel pushing away from. And because we're pleasure seeking creatures, we're never going to go if those are the feelings. So the first thought is, let me red flag. What is causing those feelings? I know that thoughts lead to feelings. What thoughts am I having that are leading to those feelings about the gym? Then we can take a deep breath, relax our nervous system, and start to consciously choose what those new thoughts look like and start to build those neural connections that are going to build different interpretations of what that experience means.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the neuroscience behind that, because it's it's just about repetition and getting those reps in of relabeling and writing down and being aware of it. And that's where having a coach like you really comes into play to help people realize that, and writing it down, keeping a journal, and it helps a ton.
Absolutely. The journal thing is interesting. I'm not a person who loves to journal, but we've had so many members go through our program and they say, I wish I had journaled more in the beginning, because now their perception of things is so night and day from when they first started. They're like, I wish I could remember where my brain was at all those weeks ago.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not a big in the journal either, but just through doing podcasting and kind of video type of document it. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just like, oh, wow. I was like completely oblivious and blind to the whole thing of what I was doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, talk to me a little bit about macros, because you have a interesting topic about, going keto, going low fat, doing, there's three main, macronutrients. There's proteins, there's fat, there's carbohydrates. There's tons of diets out there that try to eliminate one and boost up another, and vice versa. But you have a good outlook on when you talked about more towards the end of the book of, we need all three, and it's important to, that's how our body's programmed to do. Some of these diets try to get you to, besides people that might have a medical condition that, they might need to do one of those or the other. But in general, what's your thoughts on that? What's your outlook on it?
Yeah. So being a very logical person, I believe, I think we can all agree our bodies are absolute powerhouses, right? We can get a cut. It can heal itself. It can keep us breathing when we're asleep. It has capabilities we don't even fully understand as humans yet. But somewhere along the line, we decided that the reason we struggle with weight loss as a society is because we haven't tricked our body enough. And let's just start big picture before getting into any science. Does that seem logical that the answer to weight loss is to trick our body? So if we can all agree it's not, right? That maybe the key to weight loss is learning to flow with how our body's designed, not to try to trick this powerhouse. Then when you study the biology of the human body, you find that it's designed to run on three nutrients. So if you take any food label, flip it over, you'll see potassium, vitamin A, vitamin D. There are three nutrients of which we need the most. So we call them macronutrients. And those, as you said, are your carbs, your fat, your protein. The human body is designed to run on a balance of carbs, fat, protein. Anytime you go on a diet that's super low fat, you're going to feel things like hormone imbalance. You're going to feel foggy brain because your brain is 60% fat. You are not functioning correctly. Carbs obviously get the worst rap, right? Because somewhere along the line, we decided carbs make us fat, which is total BS. Carbs hold water. That's what they do. But carbs are our body's main energy source. So when you study energy production in the body, you see that the first thing it goes to when it needs energy is carbohydrates. What happens, because our body's powerhouses, if you go on a low carb diet and your body's like, okay, we're going to walk the dog today, I need some energy. If it doesn't find carbs, it's not going to just keel over and die. It's going to figure out a way to make energy, which it does by producing these things called ketones and putting you in a state of ketosis. Obviously, that's where the keto diet comes from. But again, if we're going to logic our way through this, that is not your body's first choice. It's doing that to make up for the fact that it can't find its first choice of carbs. So to me, the science and the logic are like, why in the world would I sit here trying to trick my body when I could be eating pasta and hitting my goals? It doesn't make any sense. So what we teach is a skill called macro tracking. I did not invent macro tracking. I always say my superpower is, I taught for 15 years. So I can take big, complicated subjects and make them very clear and simple. That's my superpower. It is not inventing this thing called macro tracking. But the basis of it is that you learn your personal macro plan. So I might say to you, you have 100 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat, 150 grams of carbs each day. From there, you can eat whatever the hell you want as long as you stay within your plan. So yes, we always want to make more nutritious choices. But at the end of the day, if you're someone like me, like I love whiskey, I love donuts. If someone held a gun to my head and said, Rachel, choose a life of fitness, choose a life of whiskey and donuts, whiskey and donuts wins. I'm not giving those up. But I don't have to, because I know they're not the most nutritious choices. And I can choose to fit them into my plan each day, or once in a while. I probably wouldn't do it every day. And I can still hit my goals. And this becomes such a game changer for people who are trying to fight their human nature and give up carbs, give up pasta, give up their evening glass of wine. When you step into that power of choice, instead of trying to live in a state of restriction, you flow with the biology of how you were designed, and you flow with the psychology of how you're actually going to stick with it.
Yeah, I think it helps too, because a lot of people are unaware of how they're feeling or how they react with food. And what I've learned through, I've played around with keto when it first came out, and I'm an ultra runner, so I run crazy long distances. So I was interested in maybe just because you're getting kind of fat burning stage after running for so long. So it was all really interesting. But then you become really aware of how the foods make you feel, and I think that's what is important for people to, once you get into this for a while, into the nutrition and getting healthy, you can start playing with it. Like maybe you don't do well with carbs in the morning, or maybe you do better in the morning and not at night. Maybe it's a fruit only in the like. It's really cool how you can play with it. Just pay attention to how your body feels. And like you said, like you have room in there to have your cheat, but also that's why I was happy you went into it, the book, where it's like you weren't promoting like, the Twinkie diet where the guy ate Twinkies and lost 30 pounds. Like, oh God, like don't promote that. But, you really dive into that, how the importance is of the micronutrients that being available and how they're not in those simple carbs, but, how getting the complex carbohydrates are way more beneficial, but you have room in there to play around with it a little bit. So I think that goes really far.
Absolutely. Like you said in the beginning, we have like our little eye-catching thing of ads on Facebook that are like, lose weight while you eat donuts. At the end of the day, one of the examples I give in the book, when I taught middle school, kids always like to ask the well, what if questions, right? So when we teach people about macros and about weight loss being calories in, calories out, the first thing they ask is, so as long as I'm in budget, but I'm eating only Krispy Kreme donuts, can I do that? And the answer is, in theory, yes. But the problem is you'll die before you can show off your bikini body, because weight loss might be calories in versus calories out. And we have to talk about micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, which comes from, like you said, those complex carbs, from eating fruits and vegetables and the more nutritious choices. The biggest difference with what we teach is there's no good, bad, allowed, not allowed. It's nutritious or less nutritious. So we want to make the majority of our choices more nutritious so that we're getting those vitamins and minerals. But the key is, and this is what shocks a lot of people, as a coach, I still encourage you to fit those less nutritious foods in now and then. You don't have to. If you're someone who loves eating perfectly clean, by all means. But most of us, we don't have one donut or one slice of pizza. We have 6, because we're not allowing for those more fun, less nutritious foods now and then. Yeah. So, I think people like to overanalyze, and they're like, well, what percentage, 80-20 nutrition? Like, no, aim for more nutritious foods, fit the fun ones in now and then. You avoid caving, you avoid binging. In the long run, you're going to be healthier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't realize, like, people kind of, maybe they just open their mind to realize, like, there are actually like really good, sweet, healthy foods. Like my new, what's been my thing for a while is almond butter and apples. Like it's like, it cures my craving of wanting something sweet at night, right? A little almond butter on the apple. And it's like, that kind of gets me where I need to be. But there's so many, now that you can sweeten stuff with stevia and monk fruit, and like, you can really make like a, non-crazy packed calories dessert, and really get, like, for, non-sweet packed sugar drinks, I do like sparkling water with a little shot of stevia. Like, it's like my homemade Sprite, but it does the trick,
Yeah. Yeah. And because our bodies are such amazing creatures of adaptation, you can retrain your body. Like right now, if you're used to eating a Snickers bar every day at lunch, of course you're craving that. Oh, yeah. And if you slowly take baby steps, I'm not saying to cut them out altogether, but maybe once a week you swap that out for some fruit that's going to give you that simple sugar sweetness hit, but be more nutritious. Eventually you can retrain your body quicker than most people expect to start craving the more nutritious food and get away from the processed sugar.
Yeah, that's where it gets into the whole microbiome, and you have those like you said, you're eating a Snickers bar every day. You have little microbes in your stomach that are like they're wanting that, they're needing that. You, like you said, you can cut that out for a few days, and then you're not going to get as hard as cravings, and then you can supplement it with fruit. And I think that's a great exercise. Just kind of play with it, be your own test subject.
Yeah. Yeah. And always baby steps. I think too many people, because of how the industry is set up, they go in to do these like cleanses and these major life overhauls, and understanding what we do about restriction and human nature, it's never going to last, right? If you love Snickers bars and you eat 7 a week, don't try to cut out 7 a week, right?
Yeah.
Cut out 1 or 2 and swap them for something else, and let momentum play its role that way.
Yeah, for sure. Baby steps. That definitely helps. All right, Rachel, I really appreciate you hopping on the podcast with us today. I know you offer nutrition programs. What are all the different programs, and where can people find what you offer online?
Absolutely. So the best place to find us is on our main website, which is mindstrongfitness.com. There you can read about Ignite, our 12-week program. If you're on Facebook, we have an incredible community of women. Just search MindStrong Women. And finally, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably like podcasts. We have our own called Becoming MindStrong on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts as well.
Perfect. And the book too, the book on Amazon. You can do the audio and the hard book. It's well worth it. It's a good read.
Yes. Becoming MindStrong, the truth about health, fitness, and the BS that's holding you back. It's on Amazon, and the audiobook is available on Audible as well.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, I really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too.